The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune above Sarah Martinez as she hunched over her constitutional law textbook, her highlighter moving in precise yellow strokes across the dense text about Fourth Amendment protections. The irony wouldn't hit her until later. Outside, the December wind rattled the old windows of Hamilton Hall, but inside, room 314, the world had shrunk to just her, 23 other law students, and Professor Chen's notoriously difficult final exam that loomed just 48 hours away. Sarah had claimed her usual spot in the third row, center seat, close enough to catch every nuance of the professor's expressions during lectures, far enough back to avoid looking overly eager. Her laptop sat closed beside her, its surface covered with a constellation of coffee ring stains and stressed-out doodles from the past semester. She preferred the tactile experience of paper and pen for her final review, something about the physical act of writing that helped cement the legal precedents into her memory. The classroom itself bore the weathered dignity of a building that had educated lawyers for over a century. Dark wood paneling stretched halfway up the walls before giving way to institutional beige paint that had seen better decades. Tall windows lined the western wall, their heavy frames painted over so many times that the original wood grain had long since disappeared beneath layers of institutional white. Through those windows, she could see the campus quad where other students hurried between buildings, their breath visible in small puffs against the cold air. Miranda writes, she muttered under her breath, tapping her pen against her bottom lip, a nervous habit she'd developed during her undergraduate years and never quite shaken. The case law was complex, full of exceptions and qualifications that seemed designed to trip up unwary students. She'd already spent 3 hours in the library that morning, and her eyes felt dry and strained from staring at pages of small print. Around her, her classmates were equally absorbed in their own last-minute cramming sessions. Jessica, the perpetually anxious student who sat 2 seats to her left, was frantically flipping through index cards covered in her meticulous handwriting. Behind her, she could hear Marcus practicing oral arguments under his breath, occasionally punctuating his whispered performance with decisive hand gestures that nobody else could see. The afternoon light streaming through the windows had that particular quality of early winter, thin and pale, casting long shadows that seemed to emphasize the academic solemnity of the moment. This was her 3rd year of law school, and Sarah had learned to recognize the peculiar atmosphere that descended over students during finals week. It was part desperation, part determination, with an undercurrent of caffeine-fueled hysteria that kept everyone moving forward even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them. Her phone, silenced and tucked into her backpack, buzzed occasionally with text messages from her family back in Phoenix, checking on her progress and offering encouragement. She'd look at them later. Right now, every minute counted. The constitutional law final was worth 35% of her grade, and she needed at least a B+ to maintain her position on law review. Sarah paused in her reading to stretch her neck, rolling her shoulders to relieve the tension that had settled there like a familiar weight. The classroom was unusually quiet for a Tuesday afternoon. Most students had retreated to the library or their apartments for final preparations. She preferred studying here, in the actual room where she'd learned the material. Something about being in the same physical space helped her recall Professor Chen's explanations and the classroom discussions that had illuminated difficult concepts throughout the semester. The heating system chose that moment to clank to life, sending warm air rushing through the old vents with a sound like mechanical breathing. Sarah absently tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear and returned to her notes, unaware that this would be the last moment of ordinary quiet she would experience for quite some time. Outside, the campus was settling into its usual late afternoon rhythm. Students walked purposefully between buildings, their faces set with the determined expressions that marked finals season. A maintenance worker pushed a cart across the quad, stopping occasionally to empty trash cans that overflowed with discarded coffee cups and the detritus of academic anxiety. Sarah's highlighter moved across another paragraph about exclusionary rules, Her mind focused entirely on the intricate balance between individual rights and law enforcement needs. She had no way of knowing that 3 blocks away, a black SUV was pulling into the visitor parking lot, or that 7 highly trained individuals were conducting final equipment checks in preparation for what they would later describe in their official reports as an unconventional extraction scenario. The afternoon sun continued its steady descent toward the horizon, casting the classroom in deeper shadows that made the fluorescent lights seem harsh by comparison. Sarah reached for her coffee cup, her third of the day, and found it disappointingly empty. She considered making a quick run to the vending machine down the hall but decided against it. She was in a good rhythm with the material, and breaking her concentration now might cost her precious momentum. She couldn't know that momentum was about to become the least of her concerns. The first indication that something was wrong wasn't the sound. It was the way the light in the room suddenly shifted, as if a cloud had passed over the sun, except the sky had been clear moments before. Sarah's pen froze mid-sentence as her peripheral vision caught movement outside the western windows. Not the usual movement of students crossing the quad, but something faster, more purposeful. Then the glass exploded inward. 7 figures in tactical black materialized through the windows with a precision that defied belief, their entry so swift and coordinated that Sarah's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. The first man through rolled to absorb his landing, already scanning the room with his weapon drawn before his boots hit the linoleum floor. The others followed in rapid succession, each one a study in controlled violence and military efficiency. "Everyone, down, hands visible. This is not a drill." The command came from the lead figure, his voice carrying the kind of authority that bypassed rational thought and spoke directly to survival instincts. Sarah's textbook tumbled from her hands as she instinctively dropped to the floor, her knees hitting the cold linoleum with a jarring impact that would leave bruises for weeks. Around her, her classmates were having similar reactions. Jessica's index cards scattered like snow across the floor, and Marcus's whispered oral arguments cut off mid-sentence, replaced by a sharp intake of breath that sounded unnaturally loud in the suddenly transformed classroom. But as Sarah pressed herself against the floor, her law school training began to assert itself over her shock. These weren't campus security guards, and they certainly weren't local police. Their equipment was too sophisticated, their movements too precise, their coordination too perfect. The gear they wore wasn't standard law enforcement issue, it was military grade, with modifications she couldn't identify but somehow knew were significant. "Sarah Martinez," the lead SEAL called out, his eyes finding her instantly despite her position on the floor. The fact that he knew her name sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the December air now flowing freely through the shattered windows. "We need you to come with us. Now." What? Sarah's voice cracked as she tried to form words. This was impossible. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not to third-year law students studying for finals in dusty classrooms. There has to be some mistake. There's no mistake, ma'am. A second SEAL, this one with sergeant's stripes visible on his tactical vest, stepped forward. His tone was respectful but urgent. "Your father sent us." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her father, Dr. Miguel Martinez, was a mild-mannered economics professor at Arizona State University, who spent his free time tending to his prize-winning tomatoes and arguing about fiscal policy at neighborhood barbecues. The idea that he would somehow be connected to Navy SEALs was so absurd that, for a moment, she wondered if she was having some sort of stress-induced hallucination brought on by too much studying and too little sleep. "My father teaches economics," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He doesn't know any Navy SEALs. He doesn't know anyone in the military except his neighbor who was in the Army 30 years ago." The lead SEAL exchanged a quick glance. With his team, a communication that spoke of shared knowledge and carefully rehearsed protocols. "Ma'am, I understand this is confusing, but we have extremely limited time. Your father isn't who you think he is, and right now, that's putting you in danger. That's impossible." Sarah pushed herself up to a sitting position, her hands shaking as she tried to process what she was hearing. "I've lived with him my whole life. I know who my father is." "Negative, ma'am." The SEAL's voice carried a note of something that might have been sympathy. "Dr. Miguel Martinez, the man who raised you, is actually Commander Miguel Santos, former Navy intelligence. He's been living under deep cover for the past 23 years, and that cover was compromised approximately 4 hours ago." The classroom seemed to tilt around Sarah as the words sank in. 23 years. That would be right around the time she was born. Her entire life, everything she thought she knew about her family, her identity, her father's boring academic career. "The people who compromised his cover are already moving," another SEAL added, his attention split between Sarah and the doorway. "They'll be here within the hour. We need to extract you now if we're going to keep you alive." Sarah's mind reeled. "Extract me? Keep me alive? This is insane. I'm a law student. I study constitutional law and write papers about tort reform. I don't get extracted by Navy SEALs. This is some kind of mistake or misunderstanding or—" The sound of approaching footsteps in the hallway cut her off. Heavy boots, moving with purpose. The SEALs immediately shifted formation, their casual alertness transforming into something far more dangerous. "Decision time, ma'am," the lead SEAL said, extending his gloved hand toward her. "You can come with us willingly, or we can carry you out of here. But either way, you're leaving this building in the next 60 seconds. Around them, her classmates remained frozen on the floor, eyes wide with terror and confusion. Jessica was quietly crying, her tears falling onto her scattered index cards. Marcus looked like he was trying to memorize every detail of what was happening, his analytical mind still functioning even in crisis. Sarah looked at the extended hand, then at the shattered windows where cold air continued to stream into the room that had been her sanctuary just minutes before. Her constitutional law textbook lay open on the floor beside her, the pages she'd been studying now seeming like artifacts from someone else's life. "My finals," she said weakly, knowing how ridiculous it sounded even as the words left her mouth. "I have finals in 2 days. Ma'am," the SEAL said gently, "if you don't come with us right now, you won't live to take them." The footsteps in the hallway were getting closer, and Sarah could hear voices now. Low, urgent conversations in what sounded like a foreign language. The SEAL's weapons shifted almost imperceptibly, their formation tightening around her position. Sarah took the offered hand and allowed herself to be pulled to her feet, her legs unsteady beneath her. As she stood, she caught a glimpse through one of the intact windows and saw black SUVs surrounding the building, their occupants moving with the same purposeful efficiency as the men who had just crashed through her classroom windows. "Your father wants you to know," the lead SEAL said as he guided her toward the window, "that he's sorry he couldn't tell you the truth sooner, and that everything he taught you about justice and protecting the innocent, that part was real." As they prepared to rappel from the third-floor window, Sarah's last coherent thought was that she finally understood why her father had always been so insistent that she study constitutional law. It wasn't academic curiosity about the balance of power in government. It was survival training. The repelling harness felt alien against Sarah's body as the SEAL team leader, who had introduced himself only as Ghost, secured the straps with practiced efficiency. Her hands were shaking so violently that she couldn't have fastened the buckles herself, even if she'd known how. Below them, 3 stories down, she could see the manicured campus lawn that she'd walked across countless times, now transformed into a tactical battlefield. "On my mark, you're going to step backwards off this ledge," Ghost instructed, his voice calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "Trust the rope, trust me. And whatever you do, don't look down until your feet hit the ground." "This is insane," Sarah whispered, but even as she spoke, she could hear the classroom door splintering behind them. The voices in the hallway had grown louder, more urgent, and she caught fragments of what sounded like Russian mixed with heavily accented English. "I can't do this. I'm afraid of heights. I get dizzy on step ladders. Ma'am, with respect, you're about to discover what you're actually capable of." Ghost positioned himself beside her, his own repelling gear already secured. "Your father survived 18 months in a Siberian prison camp by convincing his captors he was a cultural attaché who'd gotten lost on his way to a conference. Trust me when I say you've got more in you than you know." Before Sarah could process this new revelation about her father's past, the classroom door exploded inward. Men in tactical gear poured through the opening, but their equipment looked different from the SEALs. Heavier, more brutal, with modifications that suggested they were designed for interrogation rather than rescue. "Go, go, go," Ghost shouted. And suddenly Sarah was falling through space, the campus spinning below her in a dizzying kaleidoscope of brick buildings and winter-bare trees. The rope burned against her gloves as she tried to control her descent, her law school training utterly useless for this particular skill set. She hit the ground hard, her knees buckling as Ghost landed beside her with the grace of someone who had done this thousands of times. Around them, the rest of the SEAL team was already establishing a perimeter, their movements coordinated with the kind of precision that spoke of years of training and real combat experience. "Extraction point is 2 clicks north," one of the SEALs reported into his radio. "Package secured, but we've got multiple hostiles converging on our position." Package? They were calling her a package. Sarah wanted to object, to insist on her humanity and agency, but bullets started flying before she could form the words. The SEALs immediately formed a protective formation around her, returning fire with controlled bursts that sent their attackers diving for cover behind trees and maintenance equipment. As they moved across campus, using buildings and landscaping, for cover, Ghost kept up a running commentary that seemed designed to keep her grounded in reality. "Your father's code name was Mathematician," he explained as they paused behind the campus bookstore. "For 23 years, he's been tracking a network of arms dealers who specialize in selling American military technology to hostile nations. The economics professor thing wasn't just cover. He was using statistical analysis to identify patterns in international trade that revealed weapons shipments. You're telling me my father is some kind of spy?" Sarah pressed herself against the brick wall as another burst of gunfire echoed across the quad. "The man who taught me to ride a bicycle and helped me with my calculus homework is actually James Bond. More like John le Carré," Ghost replied, checking his weapon. "This isn't glamorous work, ma'am. It's patient, methodical, and dangerous as hell. Your father sacrificed everything. His real identity, his military career, even the chance to tell his own daughter who he really was, to protect this country." They sprinted across an open courtyard, Sarah's academic robes and study materials left far behind in the chaos. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, completely inappropriate for a tactical extraction, but somehow she found herself keeping pace with trained military operators. Adrenaline, she realized, was an incredible motivator. "Why now?" she gasped as they took cover behind a fountain that had been drained for winter. "If he's been doing this for 23 years, why is it falling apart today?" "Because yesterday, your father discovered that the arms dealers weren't just selling weapons," Ghost replied grimly. "They were selling something much worse. Information about undercover American operatives worldwide. Names, locations, families. Your father tried to stop the sale, but someone betrayed him." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Someone? In our government? We don't know yet, but the fact that they came for you instead of him suggests they want to use you as leverage. Your father is already in the wind. Our job is to make sure you stay alive long enough for him to complete his mission." As they continued moving toward their extraction point, Sarah's mind raced through everything she thought she knew about her life. Her mother's death when she was 5, had that been natural? Or had it been connected to her father's work? The way her father had always insisted she learn multiple languages, study international relations alongside law, develop what he called situational awareness? The family vacations that had taken them to seemingly random locations around the world, where her father would disappear for hours at a time on what he claimed were academic conferences. "How long have you known?" she asked Ghost as they paused at the edge of campus. "About me, I mean. Have you been watching me?" Ghost's expression softened slightly behind his tactical mask. "Your father requested quarterly reports on your well-being, starting when you turned 18. Nothing invasive, just confirmation that you were safe, doing well in school, not showing signs that anyone was taking unusual interest in you. We knew about your law review position before you did." The revelation should have felt invasive, violating, but instead, Sarah found it strangely comforting. Her father, whatever his real name was, had been protecting her from a distance, ensuring her safety even while maintaining his cover. The boring economics professor who'd raised her had actually been a guardian angel with security clearance. A helicopter appeared on the horizon, its rotors beating a rhythm that seemed to match Sarah's hammering heart. As it approached, she realized this was really happening. She was being extracted by Navy SEALs because her father was a deep-cover intelligence operative whose mission had been compromised. "One more thing," Ghost said as they prepared for pickup. "Your father wanted me to tell you that everything he taught you about the Constitution, about justice, about protecting the innocent, that was real. That was him, not the cover identity. The man who raised you exists. He just happens to also be one of the most effective intelligence operatives in American history." As the helicopter settled onto the grass beside them, its downdraft whipping Sarah's hair across her face, she thought about all the times her father had talked about the importance of public service, about using education and expertise to make the world safer. She'd thought he was talking about academic research and policy analysis. She was beginning to realize he'd been talking about something much more dangerous and much more important. The SEAL team bundled her into the helicopter, with the same efficient care they'd shown throughout the extraction. As the aircraft lifted off and the campus fell away below them, Sarah caught a glimpse of the classroom where she'd been studying just an hour earlier. The windows were still shattered, and she could see tactical teams moving through the building. Her constitutional law final was in less than 48 hours. Somehow, she doubted she'd be taking it. The helicopter's destination turned out to be a nondescript office building in downtown Norfolk, Virginia. The kind of glass and steel structure that housed insurance companies and accounting firms, completely invisible in its mundane corporate anonymity. But as Sarah was escorted through what appeared to be a normal lobby, she noticed details that her newly awakened situational awareness picked up. The security guard's eyes that tracked movement with military precision, the subtle reinforcement, around door frames the way the elevator required 2 different key cards to operate. "Welcome to the Office of Strategic Coordination," Ghost said as they descended to what Sarah assumed was a sub-basement level. "Officially, we don't exist. Unofficially, we're the people who handle the problems that are too complex for traditional intelligence agencies and too sensitive for military intervention." The elevator opened onto a bustling operations center that looked like something from a spy thriller. Banks of monitors displaying satellite feeds, analysts hunched over computers, and a massive digital map of the world with blinking lights that Sarah suspected represented active operations. But what drew her attention immediately was the figure standing at the center of it all, his back to them as he studied a wall of screens. Even from behind, even wearing tactical gear instead of his usual cardigan sweater, she knew that silhouette. It was the man who had taught her to drive, who had attended every one of her high school debate tournaments, who had helped her move into her first apartment and insisted she learn to change a tire before he'd co-sign her lease. Dad? Miguel Santos. She still couldn't think of him by any other name, turned slowly, and Sarah saw that the mild-mannered economics professor was gone. In his place stood someone who carried himself with the bearing of a career military officer, his eyes sharp with the kind of focused intensity she'd only seen when he was grading particularly difficult papers. But when he saw her, his expression cracked, revealing the father she'd always known. "Mija," he breathed, crossing the distance between them in 3 quick strides and pulling her into a fierce embrace. I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to be part of this. I spent 23 years making sure you'd never have to be part of this." Sarah held him tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with something new, gun oil and tactical gear. "Is any of it real?" she whispered against his shoulder. "Our life? Our family? Anything?" "Everything that mattered was real," he said, pulling back to look at her. "Every bedtime story, every scraped knee I kissed better, every time I told you. I was proud of you. That was all me, not the cover identity. Miguel Martinez loves you exactly as much as Miguel Santos does. But Mom—" Sarah's voice caught on the word. "Did she know? Was her death really—" "Cancer," her father said firmly. "Real cancer, real death, real grief. Your mother knew who I was, but she died because of a disease, not because of my work. Some things in this world are just cruel coincidences, not conspiracies." A younger analyst approached them cautiously, tablet in hand. "Commander Santos, we've got updates on the Volkov situation. The arms shipment cleared customs in Baltimore 2 hours ago, and our sources confirm the buyer is planning to move the intelligence files tonight." Sarah watched her father transform before her eyes, the concerned parent shifting seamlessly into what she now realized was his true role. A strategic operations commander with decades of experience in the most dangerous corners of international intelligence. "Show me," Santos said, guiding Sarah to a conference table surrounded by monitors. "Sarah, you need to understand what we're dealing with here. Viktor Volkov isn't just an arms dealer. He's a former Spetsnaz colonel who specializes in selling American secrets to our enemies. For the past 2 years, I've been building a case against his network, tracking their financial flows and identifying their sources inside our government." The screens around them flickered to life, showing surveillance, photos, financial records, and what looked like organizational charts mapping connections across multiple countries. Sarah's law school training kicked in as she studied the evidence. This was a RICO case on an international scale, with implications that stretched far beyond simple weapons trafficking. 3 days ago, I discovered that Volkov had acquired something called the Phoenix Files. Her father continued. "It's a comprehensive database of every American intelligence operative working under deep cover worldwide. Names, locations, family members, mission parameters, everything needed to roll up our entire human intelligence network." "How did he get it?" Sarah asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. Someone with very high security clearance gave it to him. Someone who knew exactly what they were selling and how much damage it would cause. Santos's expression darkened. "We have evidence that the transaction is happening tonight, here in Norfolk. Once those files are transmitted to Volkov's buyers, and we're talking about hostile intelligence services in at least 6 countries, hundreds of American operatives will be compromised. Many of them will die." The weight of what her father was telling her settled on Sarah like a physical burden. This wasn't just about international intrigue or military secrets. It was about real people, with families and children, whose lives hung in the balance. "But why come for me?" she asked. "If you're the one with the evidence, why not just grab you?" Ghost, who had been monitoring communications nearby, looked up from his equipment. "Because your father did something Volkov wasn't expecting. Instead of storing the evidence digitally, where it could be hacked or stolen, he converted everything to legal documents and filed them through academic channels. Patent applications, research papers, economic analysis reports, all hidden in plain sight in the university system." Sarah's mind raced as the implications hit her. He used his professor cover to create a legal paper trail that would hold up in court. "Exactly," her father said. "But there's a problem. The documents are encrypted using a system I developed based on your law school essays. Every paper you've written, every legal argument you've constructed, every constitutional analysis you've completed. I've been using them as the foundation for an encryption algorithm that only you and I would understand." The revelation was staggering. Her entire academic career, all her late nights in the library researching obscure legal precedents, her careful analysis of constitutional principles, it had all been preparation for this moment, whether she'd known it or not. "You need me to decrypt the files," she said, understanding flooding through her. "The transaction is happening in 4 hours," Santos confirmed. "We can intercept Volkov and his buyer, but only if we can prove what's being sold. Without that evidence, they'll claim it's a legitimate business meeting, and they'll complete the sale through other channels." Sarah looked around the operations center, taking in the urgency of the analysts, the tactical teams preparing their equipment, the weight of expectation that suddenly rested on her shoulders. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern had been memorizing the exceptions to the Miranda ruling. Now she was being asked to help save the lives of intelligence operatives around the world. "There's something else," her father said quietly. "The person who betrayed us, who gave Volkov access to the Phoenix files, they know about the encryption system. They know we need you to decrypt the evidence. That's why they came after you instead of me. They want to eliminate the only person who can unlock the proof of their treachery. So this isn't just about stopping an arms deal," Sarah realized. "This is about exposing a traitor at the highest levels of our government. A traitor who has access to some of our most closely guarded secrets," Santos confirmed. "Someone who knows about operations that won't be declassified for decades. Someone who could do incalculable damage if we don't stop them tonight." As if summoned by their conversation, an alarm began blaring throughout the operations center. Red lights flashed as analysts scrambled to their stations, and Sarah could hear urgent radio chatter crackling through the communications systems. "What's happening?" she asked, but the answer came from one of the analysts before her father could respond. "Sir, we've got movement at the Norfolk International Terminal. Multiple vehicles, heavy security, and our satellite imagery shows what looks like a mobile communications array being set up in Warehouse 7. It's starting." Santos turned to Sarah, his expression grave. "The sale is happening ahead of schedule. We have maybe 2 hours before those files are transmitted and our people start dying." He paused, studying her face. "I know this isn't the life I wanted for you, Mija. I know you didn't choose this. But right now, you're the only person who can stop it." Sarah thought about her classmates back at law school, probably still cramming for finals, worried about nothing more serious than grade point averages and summer internships. She thought about the life she'd planned. Corporate law, maybe a judgeship someday, a quiet suburban existence built on the foundation of constitutional principles and legal precedent. Then she thought about the intelligence operatives whose names were in those files, people like her father who had sacrificed everything to protect their country, and the families who would mourn them if she walked away. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, and heard her father's pride in her decision echo through his relieved sigh. "First," he said, "we need to decrypt those files. Then we need to stop a traitor, prevent an international intelligence catastrophe, and hopefully keep you alive long enough to explain to your professors why you missed your constitutional law final." Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling. "I think they'll understand," she said. "After all, I'm about to get some very practical experience in national security law." As the operations center erupted into controlled chaos around them, Sarah realized that her education had been preparing her for this moment in ways she'd never imagined. All those late nights studying the balance between individual rights and national security, all those papers analyzing the legal framework that governed intelligence operations, all those constitutional law principles that seemed so theoretical in the classroom, they were about to become very, very real. Her finals could wait. She had more important work to do.